Hello, good evening. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm very excited to present tonight's election forum. My name is Max Reinsdorf. I am the newly appointed Interim Executive Director of Growing Community Media, publisher of the Wednesday Journal and its 3 fantastic sister properties. I'm very happy to take the reins on from Dan Haley, who many of you know. Tonight I'm very pleased to present this forum. It's a critical part of the work we do over at GCM and serving as a voice for our communities. So thank you for joining us. I'd ask that at the entrance table you take a look at the material we've presented. We've got a survey we'd like you to take. You let us know what you like about us, what you don't like about us, and we can present some better stuff to you in the future, or maybe it's already good enough. Again, thanks very much, and with that, I'd like to hand it over to Laura.
Thank you, Max. All right, welcome everyone. This is a type of forum, a candidate forum that I used to run at Buzz Cafe, so it's a little bit different format. I'm going to try and keep it lively. I'm going to try and keep the conversation going. I'm trying to answer all of your questions. So questions were sent to me by email this afternoon, and then I've received handwritten questions from the audience tonight. If you happen to have a question, you can write it down on a card, and I think Jill is bringing them up to me if you have anything that pops into your head as it progresses tonight, you want to ask a question. So hopefully it'll be super valuable for you to be an educated voter on April 1st. I also want to thank the Wednesday Journal for inviting me to do this forum. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Dan. And to the candidates running. I always have full deference to people who are willing to throw their hat in the ring and do a thankless job. So thank you very much for running and for your service. That doesn't mean I'm going to take it easy on them. All right, we're going to start off with an easy one. I'll ask, we'll just start it off and we'll just see how it sort of develops organically. So we'll just start off with Joshua here. Now that we've gone through a fall season, what are your thoughts on the new leaf collection program, how it went? Would you support its continuation or would you recommend changes? Yes.
So I would recommend that we revisit the LEAF program. I do recognize that there have been some huge benefits of it in terms of not having giant piles of leaves in the middle of our road. It's a big safety improvement. My son noted on his ride to school that he felt a lot safer because he didn't have to navigate around leaf piles as well. So that part of it is kind of non-negotiable to me. Whatever we do, we're not going to go back to giant piles of leaves sitting on the street for, ever. But I think there's room for improvement. One of the things where I think we did drop the ball was on seniors and people with disabilities in terms of helping them out with leaf collection. So if we do have a program where that's required, I would like to see that stepped up as well. And I think there's also an opportunity to evaluate different machines and so forth. So a machine that maybe Oak Park could own. I know that we did look into that and it was relatively expensive, but I'd like to revisit that decision as well and potentially have a machine that could go and like suck up the leaves from the curb before they can get to a giant level. But I do think like it's kind of non-negotiable to me that we would go back to exactly the way that we were doing it before. I don't think that really worked very well.
Great. Anybody have anything they want to add to that? Any candidates want to go ahead? Something new and different?
Well, I would not have.
No. Up.
I would not have voted for that overturning of the program. That program had been around for about 80 years. And as an 80-year-old program, the rationale given was fires. And I mean, this has been here for decades and decades. I do think there are issues that need to be addressed, the size of the leaf piles, the number of weeks that we collect. And I don't think this LRS company does a good job. I don't think they do a good job collecting our garbage. I don't think they did a good job of this. I don't think they wanted to do the leaf collection. And I think that's a big issue that was kind of not glossed over at all. It was looked at very carefully, but it was not addressed. So I just think that LRS is an issue. I think that we need, it did affect seniors disproportionately and also small landscape businesses, many of whom are minority-owned businesses, and they lost business. So I think there was a lot that wasn't considered. A little bit longer would have been beneficial, another year to consider it, but that's what I would do. Thank you.
Anybody else want to weigh in? Go ahead. Lucia?
So I am one of the current trustees. I'm an incumbent running for re-election, and I did support the transition to in our leaf collection method. For me, the big motivator was safety, and so we had not just giant leaf piles, accumulating in our streets that was creating reduced visibility, but also instances of, collisions between motorists, bicyclists, pedestrians. The fire point is one that really I don't think can be understated. In 1 year, we had 4 LRS trucks catch fire, in addition to vehicles from private individuals. And that was just not unique to 2023. Certainly, we had received reports even prior to that, of that happening. And so there were real safety concerns that, as an elected official, I didn't think I could ignore. There were also real benefits to transitioning to a different collection method. We had some overtime savings. We were able to free up Public Works to complete several street restoration projects. It was easier. The fire department has reported that it's been easier for them to navigate streets with their larger, oversized vehicles. And we had sort of, on a related but not, directly hitting on the safety point, we had an unprecedented increase in our composting program with 44 new accounts added in just 4 months. And that's never happened in the history of the composting program. And so I think as I weigh the concerns, the benefits, and what some of the drawbacks were, because I do think that there were drawbacks. What my job is as an elected official is to weigh all of those things, not just certain aspects of the program and of the transition, but all of them. And so as I do that, I think it's important to acknowledge that as an elected official, I'm the kind of leader that is charged with not just governing, but also I've got to be a good learner. I've got to be a good student in terms of what's best for the community. And one thing that I think we definitely can take away is a process point. I think making the decision to transition and actually doing the transition in 1 year was too quick. And I have heard that from people who both support the program and do not support the transition. And that point is not lost on me. And I think that is, that's a gap in the decision-making process that I certainly hold myself accountable and that I think as a board we're accountable for. And so that's a very important takeaway. I'm absolutely open to considering other options, but I do think that any option that brings about significant noncompliance, that brings about safety issues, particularly for our children, would be an option that I would not support and not be in favor of.
All right. Anything to add? GBK?
Scary question, right? My name is Chibike Enya. I'm in my last year of being on the village board and running for re-election. But what I can say is I brought it back to vote on again because I saw what it was causing a lot of my neighbors, a lot of my friends and family, which was just issues being able to keep up with the massive amount of leaves that they had. Some people take a tremendous amount of pride. Some of my neighbors, I have a retired police officer as one of my neighbors who loves to take care of his lawn, but also do other neighbors' lawns. And he pulled me aside and was like, gee, I don't think I can do all of this as much as I've been doing. And for me, that was hard to hear because I know he loves doing it. And he's like, I just can't keep up with this. And understanding that if someone like him can't keep up with it, I know it's gonna be bothering a lot of other Oak Park residents. I know my dad couldn't even do it. He was, dealing with health issues and not able to even address doing it on the north side. So I was lucky enough, I don't know if any of you all know, like the Oak Park wrestling team, if you let them know that your address, they will come to your house and they will actually take care of your leaves for you. It's something I'd been doing since I was in high school. But that isn't a solution for everybody, right? They can't take care of everybody's lawn. So what I was proposing was that we take a pause on that program and let Oak Parkers continue to do it the way that they're doing until we can find a more sustainable solution for the community. When I say that, the reason why I'm saying that is because what happened almost immediately after that, the village sold away all of the equipment that we use for that specific task of leaf pickup. So we don't actually have the ability to go back in time and stop doing that, start doing that. So we have to figure out a better way of taking care of this and figuring out the other opportunities that we can work through as a village to continue to make this happen, especially because our seniors are our second rising population in Oak Park. So it's definitely something that we take to heart and that we're trying to engage, and that's what I brought up to the board, is we have to engage more with our residents, and it's not just through the internet. It could be door knocking, it could be community meetings like this and gatherings of actually having a meeting of, hey, what does work? How do we make this work for everyone in Oak Park? And that's what I'm always committed to, is listening and figuring out solutions to the problems that we have.
Jen, if you wanna, we can move on.
I'll be really, really brief. I feel like I can't not address the leaf question. My name is Jenna Loving-Jacobson. I am running for village trustee. I appreciate all the comments around learning from the process and improving the process. I supported the change for safety, environmental reasons. Those are my top priorities, but change is hard. And I think I appreciate, again, all of the reflection on what went right and what went wrong, because we want to make sure folks who were negatively impacted by the change didn't feel like they were being taken advantage of or conned in some way, that there was a service they'd been paying for that was taken away. That's a really crummy feeling. To feel like you're not having a voice in the decision-making is a really crummy feeling. And so the rollout and what we could learn from that change process, I think, is where I would hop in for future decision-making around whether it's leaf collection or other public works. The other thing I would say, to add on to what Josh reflected on, is that the initial evaluation of the program was pretty positive, but it was missing some information I'd like to learn more about the impact on the landscaping businesses and then the cost to private residents, because that wasn't included in the initial memorandum, sort of talking about how the increased composting was beneficial, lower emissions from the collection trucks, et cetera. So there's some data that I would still like to see in evaluating, but overall, I do support moving forward and trying to improve with this change.
All right, why don't you just hold on to the microphone? I'll ask you another question. And just for a side note, we did not do introductions because we're trying to get right to the questions and get right to the heart of stuff. Their names are right in front of them. Hopefully that we can manage, and then they're sort of introducing themselves as they go. All right, Jenna, How will you, if elected, promote affordable housing development and aid those experiencing homelessness in Oak Park?
This is a question I think everybody's going to want to answer. I really appreciate it because it's a top priority. In Oak Park, like the rest of the country, we have a housing crisis. So absolutely has to be a top priority to build more. And I will prioritize making sure that as we revisit our housing policies, that expanding our affordable housing stock is part of that plan. First and foremost, we have experienced in Oak Park not only rising housing costs, but we've lost population of Black residents significantly over the last few years, and that's connected, right? So our housing policy needs to be equity-minded. 2 out of 5 renters in Oak Park are housing cost burden, and the most housing cost burden, meaning they're spending too much of their earnings on housing, are folks over 65. So if we want to be a place, and I do, where people can stay in the homes that they've made for decades and the community that is their home, then we need to expand housing options, diversify housing options. And that, I think we'll end up talking a little bit about the missing middle. That will address that, as well as having more options for younger families who want to move into our community. But we need to make some changes to the inclusionary housing ordinance in order to reach those goals. But I think increasing affordable housing stock is a top priority. And luckily, even though it's complicated, luckily it intersects with a lot of other top priorities, right? So it helps us live into our values of being a economically and racially diverse community. It will support one way of addressing the rising homelessness crisis. It's not the only solution, but it is part of the solution to homelessness. And when we have secure, accessible, affordable housing, people can hold down their jobs. They can build community. They can spend their money at our local stores. It's better returns for health, for economic vitality. It has to be, one of the top board goals, I think, in the next term.
Go ahead.
So shortly after I was elected in 2022, I co-sponsored the Housing Trust Fund, which is a standalone fund in the village budget. And I really thought it was important to establish this fund as an independent fund that's still part of the budget, but I wanted to make sure that we were keeping track of monies from our inclusionary zoning ordinance that were deposited into the fund, and then ensuring that we had very targeted uses and programs for those funds. And that fund has been successful, and it's managed to support over 100 affordable housing units in the rental and temporary housing space. I think looking forward into the new term, we have to focus on home ownership. Usually, Oak Park is a leader across many issues and in many areas, but when it comes to home ownership, we actually lag behind our Chicago metro region municipal counterparts. So we are significantly lower in terms of home ownership rates for Black, for Latino, and Asian families. I think we want to continue to be a leader, and I think we want to be a leader in this space as well. And so I would support utilizing housing trust fund dollars to fund home ownership programs. So programs related to down payment assistance, programs related to first-generation homeowners, first-time homeowners, inclusive of home education resources, credit education resources. I think all of these will sort of help us be more successful in the home ownership space. I think with respect to homelessness, I'll just add that I do see that as a slightly separate problem, and there's an opportunity for separate solutions in addition to affordable home ownership, which I think is part of it, but I don't think that's all of it. So we just recently approved the opening of a temporary shelter here in Oak Park. In addition to that, we should be supplementing our monies to go towards street outreach programs in addition to wraparound services, so that we're really, for individuals who are unhoused, who are coming into that shelter, we're really assisting them to get to the next level of home stability. We're not just giving them a place to stay for a few days or for a short period of time, but we really are trying to enable them to really get to the next level and get into some more permanent housing long-term.
So a couple points here, both affordable housing and homelessness. So affordable housing, I think the village has done a really good job in the last few years addressing affordable housing, and I certainly appreciate that. I voted for and of course supported the first inclusionary zoning ordinance in the history in Oak Park, and it's since in the last few years has raised millions and millions of dollars, and that has been deployed appropriately. And I think we're now at a point since 2019 to now to revisit that and relook at that and tweak that and determine are those the right metrics? And we need to do that, and the next board should do that. And I also think homelessness is a very interesting problem, and it's growing. And as mentioned in the Wednesday Journal, between last year, I think 2 years ago, and last year, it increased 23%. And what was really bothersome and troubling was that for families, if you have a family with a minor child, it increased 80%. So that's something that we need to address. We are addressing that, and I support continuing to address that. We need to get our ideas around a more permanent way to address that, and I do think that's necessary. I met with Congressman Danny Davis last week, and he graciously supported my campaign. And in our discussion, we talked about homelessness. And it was a very good discussion, and he has a very succinct way of summarizing things in just a few words. And when we talked about it, he said, if you woke up and there was a homeless person by your back door, would you step over him or would you help him? And I think that's really what the essence of it is. And also, when he said, he also mentioned that the parable of the, Good Samaritan, I think it was. And he said, we have to treat people with compassion, dignity, and respect. And you can't ignore that. And Oak Park is a community that absolutely, I think we agree on that point. We want to treat people with respect and dignity and try to help them when we can. Homelessness is something I'm committed to helping and getting the ideas further down the road with more solutions in the future. Thank you.
So, yeah, I think Oak Park definitely has an affordable housing, I hesitate to call it crisis, but it's pretty bad. People can't imagine how their children could afford to live here, even in their own home. And many of us are really wondering how we could even possibly afford to retire here in Oak Park. I think it's a severe issue. And I think one thing that we struggled to do over the last couple decades is build enough new housing to make space for our kids to live here, for us to retire, for us to downsize into, out of our homes into more appropriate housing. So what I would propose is that we amend our building codes to allow missing middle housing in Oak Park. And missing middle housing is a little technical term. It's defined as apartment units from 2 to about, I think, 18 units. So they're relatively small apartment buildings, and allowing that appropriately in neighborhoods so that you're not building things that are outsized or out of style with a particular neighborhood. I think if we create housing abundance in Oak Park, that this will bring down the cost of housing in Oak Park and make room for us and our children to live here. I think the Affordable Housing Fund also has a role. I think it's done a great job of building 100 affordable units. I live very close to them in South Park, the 801 South Boulevard, which is an amazing building, and it also provides affordable retail as well for a number of thriving local businesses. Addis Cafe, I love that place. So I think that is a great model, and we should continue to do it, but I think market rate housing has to have a role in this. There's only so much money that's available for truly affordable subsidized housing, and that's not going to provide enough units to address the affordable housing crisis that we have. I think that the unhoused population, the homeless problem, and affordability are two things that go hand in hand. We know from the data across the nation that homelessness is strongly correlated with housing affordability. So the more expensive housing gets, the harder it is for somebody to find an extra bedroom or an extra bed in somebody's house. People are they're crammed into the max, and they don't have any extra room for that relative. So it just shifts down, and people end up on the streets, and it's unacceptable here in Oak Park. So I think addressing affordability is an important key part of this, but that's kind of more long-term. I support our mission with Housing Forward and the emergency beds, and agree with Lucia as well that we need to extend that mission and find more stable sources of funding for Housing Forward. I think we're funding them on a relatively ad hoc, year-to-year basis. I think we need a strong commitment to that and addressing the homeless population in Oak Park.
Homelessness is a really close to my heart thing. I have, since I was 4 or 5, worked with pads when I was a kid, putting in all the time I could when I was a Boy Scout, when there was even our church doing the crop walk, making sure that we were able to provide. One of the things my dad always told me is, you're one step away from being homeless. It's one bad accident, it's one bad investment, it's one step away. One of our biggest assets that we do have is the Homeless Coalition, and we have Housing Forward. And what we can do with those things are continue to support them as best as we can, but also to continue to ask them, what is the need? So when they came to our board table a few weeks ago and we asked them, what do you need? And they said, we're looking at other ways in which we could expand this beyond just the beds, and finding other partners, not just in Oak Park, but around our borders, and seeing how could we work with our other communities to make sure, because as you can see, there is not much room to grow in Oak Park, but other places do have other opportunities that we don't always have. So how do we partner with them and have a meeting of the minds and say, well, this is what we did well, this is where we found our pitfalls, here's how we can work with you to make this work in your communities so that we can bring people along. But it's also making sure we don't leave people behind. What our program does currently doesn't allow for people who aren't technically Oak Park residents to utilize the bed system the way that we would like them to. So we have to figure out ways to get more creative in helping our brothers and sisters out through tough times, but also we need to, like Trustee Lucia said, we need to figure out how are we going to actually work on giving them wraparound services? Because I do think that we have to work on things not just about getting you off the street, but we have to figure out, are we going to get you job training? Are we going to help you with mental health issues? Are we going to help you with substance abuse issues? There is a plethora of issues that go on with our homeless community, and we always think it's just a money thing. I have a friend, call him Jerry, you've probably seen him. He rides around on his bike. He's homeless, he has bags full of food, and he brings it back to the whole community of his homeless friends. So every time I go out, I want to make sure that I keep Jerry going, because he said it's a choice for him to be homeless. He doesn't need everything that every homeless person needs. He says, if you got money, give it to that guy. If you got food, give it to me, because I'm going to make sure it gets to the people that need it the most. So I always think about Jerry and people who are not always facing the same level of homelessness that everyone else is facing. And when it comes to housing, I really think about, how do you expand the missing middle? When I grew up in Chicago, as a young boy, we lived in an apartment building that had every race you could think of, everything from seniors to toddlers. We all took care of each other. It was mixed income. There were people there who walked out in business suits, and there were people who got out of the building in just a white t-shirt and pants and drove a taxi cab. So there is a lot that is to be said about that missing middle, and we have to remember that it gives opportunities for everybody, especially those of lower income. So I think we have to expand that. I love the 801 project. I thought it was a great project for us, It allowed for people to be getting their first home. A person that we got to see the house with, or see the condo with, told us this was a dream to her. She worked in the bank across the street and never thought she would ever afford to live in Oak Park. And how sad is that you can't afford to live in the town that you work in? So seeing her have that first opportunity, to me, just lit my eyes up, and I was like, how do we do more of this? And I talked to the community builders, and they said it's really hard to make a project like this work because you have to have everybody willing to do their part. So that's what we can do as Oak Parkers, to say we're intentional about this. We want to see these type of houses come to Oak Park because it allows for us not only to see people that look like us have opportunities, but it also allows us to grow old in this community and have more opportunities for ourselves as we age.
Okay, why don't you hold on to the microphone? You're talking about a lot of things that cost a lot of money. There's a lot of talk right now about what to do about Village Hall and a police station, which also looks like it's going to cost a lot of money. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what your thoughts are about that particular project and just in general level of spending going on at the village level.
Do I have to? No, I'm kidding. No, when it comes to Village Hall and the police station first, so I'll say police station first and foremost is something that has to happen. That's not a nice to have, or, we don't have time for this or money for this. It is something that is needed. I would suggest that any of you here who hasn't had a chance to go check out the police station, go look at it, and you'll think that you walked into that 70s show. It is very dimly lit. It is not a place for a person coming to work is going to feel excited about the work that they do. It is, and that's not what I'm saying, every day should be for you, but I do think you should be able to come into work with a positive attitude, and that's not what any of those police are going through right now. I happen to be the liaison to the Citizens Police Oversight Commission, so I consistently talk to our officers and try to get a feel for how they are doing in their workspace, and it's not well. They are consistently having people transfer out of our police department at record numbers. I had a lot of friends who were police officers here in Oak Park that have left to go to other places. I still have some friends that are still there, but it is hard for them to continue to do their job when they are not given the resources to do it well. And they can't even practice being the officers that they want to be because we don't have the facilities to allow them to do certain testing. So you have officers wanting to do better but don't have the opportunity or the resources to do better. So that is something that has to be invested in. It's not a question of that at all. I think it's how do we make sure that this is something that is affordable for us, but to remember that when you build these buildings, they have to last for 50 years or more. So you cannot just say, okay, well, I got this GC who does a great job, he can put this together like that. No, that's not how it works. They actually have to, and as if you heard in our last village board meeting when we talked about this, they said you have to make the building has to be earthquake proof. So that's a non-negotiable anymore. All modern municipal buildings have to be earthquake proof. So that's another cost add to what we're looking at. They don't have the equipment to do any of their firearms training. That building cannot facilitate firearms training, so they have to go off-site somewhere else. So imagine, God forbid, something happens. You don't have the officers always having the ability to have been trained to do what they need to do to keep us safe every day. So that bothers me to know that that's a problem that they're dealing with. So we have to make sure that the facility takes care of all of their needs, and we want to make sure that our village staff as well is taken care of in a building that is ADA compliant. As we've seen before at our board table, and when we had, Aging and Community come to talk to us at the board table, the guy literally caught himself by his walker before he fell down the stairs. And that is very troubling to me, knowing that I have an 80-year-old dad who is sometimes too proud to use a walking cane. You shouldn't have to worry about the steepness of getting through Village Hall. When you do walk through Village Hall, if you have been in our council chambers, you see that you have to walk all the way around just to get to the ramp to come down and talk to us. And it can be a pretty daunting walk if you're thinking about this and you're a senior and you've already had to either take the lift to get up to the stairs, to get up the stairs, or walk up these steep stairs. So there's a lot of things that have to be considered when you think about what our building truly is and how we can make this affordable. So I think we just have to really think about doing this rebuild, but making it affordable, but also catching us up to what is ADA compliant and making sure that it gives people dignity when they come to Village Hall.
So I'll start with the value that village employees deserve to come to work in a safe work environment, and that village government and municipal services should be accessible to all. And that's not currently what we have. So I agree that this does have to be a priority for the next term. We can't go on any longer just like kicking the can of the police department renovation or rebuild down the road. That's going to inevitably disrupt Village Hall, so Village Hall will also have to be renovated. That said, I think that from a citizen's perspective, watching the process, it feels like it's gotten out of hand, and I think it's not really what I've seen proposed. The $150 million proposal is too big and too expensive. So I would like to see a revisit to what we really need from this space, what our village employees, our police department need from their work environment, and sort of revisit what the future of village services might look like, as GBK said, in 50 years. What's the scope of need? And just take a quick pause and revisit, and maybe start with the budget as well as the need before committing to a project so big that will inevitably impact the larger budget. So we have to consider tax levy implications and maybe get more creative with potential partnerships and sharing space across, potentially across government bodies.
So understanding that the police station, I think, is an established need, I'm going to focus on the Village Hall discussion. Because one thing we have not talked about yet at the board table is a property tax assessment and the impact to the village's property tax levy, and then the residual impact to the overall property tax levy, which is essentially, the tax bills that our residents see. And so several weeks ago, I asked for village staff to come back with that impact assessment. We can't talk about a building that's supposed to meet the needs of the community and have it be community-centered without also talking about the cost to the community, because it's not as community-centered as we might want it to be, and it sort of takes away from that perspective a little bit if, when we talk about financing it with 20, 30-year municipal bonds, we end up pushing people out of the community because they can't afford that long-term tax increase. And so, that's something that I'll continue to look for at the village board table as we continue to discuss Village Hall. But we've not yet talked about the cost to our residents and to our taxpayers. And I think we've got to bring that into the discussion, and I think that this is the time to do that.
So I just want to mention a couple of things. It's really a discussion between needs and wants. I think we need a new police station. We would like, or we want, a modern, updated Village Hall. It's going to be an expensive project. I looked at the numbers. My background is an accountant by degree, so I looked at them, and it was a 5% bond for a $150 million project would add about 30% to our village levy, and that would be 30% on year one, and it would go for 20 years. That's a big commitment. I think cooler heads will prevail. I think that we're going to probably not end up, I'm hoping. I wouldn't advocate for a total gut, because that's really what's on the table, is they want to change everything. They want to move council chambers and do other things that really, I don't think, are absolutely necessary. We do have accessibility issues that absolutely need to be addressed immediately, as soon as it can be done. Those things don't cost that amount of money. They should be addressed. I think that, and again, my background's business, so like what we do when we're looking at a project is we establish a budget. How much can we afford? How much do people are willing to pay in their tax? But what you have a discussion with the public, you come back, set a budget, and you work backwards, you say, this is the number, we're not going to exceed that. We're actually, at the moment, and I'm not saying it's still forming, so I don't want to say it's working out this way for sure, but there's a lot of things being proposed. They all add up to a big number, and I don't think that that's the way we should do it. And I think, again, cooler heads will prevail. We will look back, and we need to set a proper budget for this and move forward, and not to exceed that budget. One other thought is, Village Hall, yes, the future of Village Halls in general are important to consider. What is it going to look like in not 50 years, in 5 years, 2 years? We're rapidly consolidating and doing things online, and so I don't know that there's going to be the brick and mortar need in the few years. We certainly need a Village Hall. I just don't know if it's going to be this big facility. And keep in mind that Village Hall was closed. This isn't the exact perfect example, but Village Hall was closed for a year during the pandemic. And I mean, people weren't crying and upset with not getting their services. We delivered the services. We didn't do paving, certainly. There weren't permits being issued, but the essential services were delivered. So I just think that that's an important fact to consider. We didn't even have a street address at that point where people could come to, and we were still delivering the proper services. I'm not saying that's where we should go, but I do think that that's a consideration. Thank you.
So I'm not going to repeat the acknowledgement of the critical need that others have so thoroughly gone over for a new Village Hall and a new police department. I mean, I agree that those are critical needs, and unfortunately, we're in a regime now where construction costs are significantly higher than they were pre-pandemic. That's just a fact. And recently we had the Oak Park Avenue sewer and streetscaping project that went out for bid, and the best bid came in $5 million over what we had thought it would cost, which was already relatively. So we're going to be facing these sorts of issues across the board as we try to fund big infrastructure projects. And I think we do need to lead from a budgetary perspective in terms of acknowledging the impact to the property taxes and incorporating that into the needs versus wants assessment of the things that we develop. And thinking about, do we need the highest end materials on a streetscaping, or can we do a replacement that saves us $1 million? Those sorts of things matter. Also, I think there's an opportunity for using data and technology. I come from the tech space, and I think we're missing a beat if we build a Village Hall that's kind of for the historical. We need to build a Village Hall that's for the next generation. My kids, they don't watch television, they don't watch cable TV, they watch YouTube, they watch TikTok, and when they go to pay for a bill in the future in Oak Park, they're going to want to find the app. They're not going to want to go into a physical location and pay their bill and so forth. And the workforce as well, I think, is going to change relatively quickly in the next decade or so. So I'm really worried that we're going to build a facility for the last generation and not for the next generation of workers and citizens out there. And there could be significant cost savings in realizing that in terms of the amount of space that we need and the level of services that we can provide if we really do engage with all the new technology and the data that's out there.
Hold on to the mic. We're going to talk about the police. We are understaffed. The police department remains understaffed. What do you believe the reason is that Oak Park is having difficulty filling these positions, and what do you intend to do about it?
So it's not unique to Oak Park. So I don't think there's anything particularly unique about Oak Park. Everybody's having problems finding qualified police officers. And I think the one unique problem that Oak Park has is that it has very high standards for police officers. So that probably makes it even harder to find. We're a special place and we expect a lot out of our police, and we should. I think the police department plays a role in this as well in terms of it being a recruiting issue around that. I support the police chief and our goal to get to full staffing, and would continue to support that on the board in terms of funding those positions and funding whatever they need in terms of retention and recruitment around that, and also moving forward on the police department as quickly as we can. I think there's opportunities as well in terms of the alternative calls for response program, now called ECHO. So this is a program where we have non-sworn officers who go out on non-emergency, non-violent calls, and they can fill the gap. And we're just starting to pilot this, and in the pilot phase, it's not really going to, we're still gonna have sworn officers going out with them. But eventually, what I think this is gonna do is it can fill the gap, and it can allow our sworn officers to do the police work that we need behind the scenes and to really deal with those more critical issues and have, things like a stolen bike report handled more appropriately.
Very good. So I think that the police station is an important part of this discussion. It is a national issue. It's not just Oak Park, and it's not specific to here, but having a decent facility where we can recruit staff, it is, I've talked to the police, and they've said that is a stumbling block for getting good officers here, because they can go to other places and have good training facilities and really a nicer work environment. And there are some issues here. There have been in the past that were identified with lead and other things. So those things need to be corrected. And by building a new station, I advocate for really building, for designing, building, and occupying the police station within 3 years. I'd like to put it on a timetable where we keep to it and we focus on that, and we actually get to that point. We've been discussing this since 2017, and I think it's time to finish the discussion. I also want to say that as we restaff and get the staffing up, we need to re-engage our community policing officers because they've been pulled back in. And in addition, the traffic division, we actually have a traffic division, or had. It's now been redeployed. So we need to reestablish that. People talk about unsafety, how things are unsafe in Oak Park. You drive and bicycle around and walk around, it's true. But we need to have some enforcement, and I think that with the added staffing, we should focus on the traffic division and the community policing officers, and it'll be helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll just add that I don't think it's been mentioned yet. I certainly agree with Josh and Jim about the police station and how that plays into staffing, as well as the alternative crisis response program, both of which I wholeheartedly support. The only thing I will add is recruitment. I've supported the chief's efforts to really develop a very robust recruitment process and program, not just for new hires, but also for lateral hires. We're losing, at a certain point, some of our decreased staffing was because we were losing police who had been trained in Oak Park and who we had invested in, and they were making lateral moves to other communities. And so, a robust recruitment process also tries to reverse that process so that we are gaining not just brand new police, but also police who are seasoned, who can come in and sort of hit the ground running and step in and help us support our public safety efforts. And so I would just add that piece about recruitment as well.
I also didn't hear anything that I want to counter. I agree with what has been stated. I'd like to declare my support and enthusiasm for the rollout of the alternate response, the ECHO program. I'd like to, fully commit to seeing it through and committing to, its full implementation. I think it'll in part help with staffing, not entirely, but I also think it's, a good financial move as well as a healthier model. The other thing I wanted just to say about what I'd like to see more of from police that I have had the pleasure of, in my work in gun violence prevention, had the pleasure to do in partnership with the police department is public education. They are some of our best advocates for public safety through education. They are a voice of authority, and when we are trying to, educate our community around things like secure firearm storage, which has been a project of mine for many years. They're a really important partner. So just in the role of trustee, I also see, that kind of collaboration being really important as we support their retention and filling the staffing shortages.
I know I'm the long-winded one. I'll try to be quick. So some of the problems like I said before, I'm a liaison for Citizens Police Oversight Commission. So what we got the opportunity to see was, one, we did the Barry Dunn study. Barry Dunn showed us that we had about 22 different significant calls that they were being diverted to, which they really didn't need to be on, right? So President Scaman and I, and board members, we talked a lot about this, so made a motion that we put this money towards alternative calls for response. And after that, I worked with President Scaman in looking for all of our mental health experts throughout our village, but also talking to police officers, also talking to sergeants, lieutenants, all the people we could to see what truly, because you can do as many of these assessments as you want, but sometimes it doesn't truly capture the people who actually have boots to the ground. And they were very agreeable with us on the fact that they didn't need to be on all these calls. So hence the ECHO team that you'll be seeing rolling out pretty soon here that will go out to mental health calls. What you were also able to see through the conversations I had, not just with CPOC, but off the record with people was, hey, this is not competitive when we look at salaries around the area. We were literally getting flyers dropped off at Village Hall from villages like Prospect, like Berwyn, telling them that they could get up to $10,000 to $20,000 just for a bonus to go laterally to another community. So it was very hard to hear those things, but for me, it was, hey, we need to pay them properly or we will lose these good people, these good officers, especially what I like to call the missing middle of officers is those that are over 10 years and below 20 years. Those are the people who end up teaching the rookies when they get on. And if you don't have those people out there, you are not instilling confidence within those younger rookies who are on the streets, and that's when mistakes happen. So you have to make sure that you're retaining those people, that we're doing the best that we can. So we look to make their salaries more competitive, and we did that. One of the other things that I try to go back to sleep after seeing something crazy on the street. So we also needed to not only help them on their hours, but help them with mental health. We also needed to make sure that they had other opportunities. They also talked about not being able to get to the gym to keep themselves physically active. So we talked about how do we get them some other amenities that could help them out throughout their job. So we've worked on a lot of these things, but it still is a process to retain them. We have to work on their training. They've told me this personally, that they want to get even better training than what they have, because I always get worried when they're on their street and they said, hey, we signed up for this. We know what we're doing. We love to protect the people of Oak Park. That is our job, but it's what we actually love to do. But we need to make sure that we're properly trained when we're out there so we don't make mistakes when we're out there. So I think we have to continue to think about our officers in a way that allows them to be safe on the streets, and that is a multi-pronged, situation that we are currently working on and thinking about all the time, because we have some really bright, amazing people that are on this force, and I want them to feel like they can retire here.
All right, I'm going to actually ask a yes/no question. I really appreciate if you just say yes or no. Then I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Let's see if they can do it. Will you commit to supporting gender-affirming services in the village for transgender and non-binary minors, even if the federal government threatens to pull federal funds from the village? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, follow up. Give me your ideas, strategies on policies that you could advocate for that would make systemic change if elected to this position with regard to transgender and LGBTQ plus. Did I just ask that crazy? Okay. To further ensure that transgender members of our community will be protected, have you thought of any strategies or policies that you could advocate for to systemically put in place policies that would help this group of people in our village? I've gotten several questions on this. I'm trying to put them all together into one. Hopefully that's helpful. We've only got about 5 more minutes also, so I'm trying to squeeze in at least one more. So anybody want to jump in on that one?
I'd like to think about this more, and I will, and I have been, and I will. But I will start by saying last weekend I went to a demonstration in front of the Lurie's Children's Hospital, protesting their rescinding of the gender clinic for children who use those services. And I know that Lurie serves the children of Oak Park, right? So there are neighbors in Chicago, but they're serving our kids, or they were. And one of the things I think could be really powerful for an elected board is to use all the leverage we can up the chain of government, for example, to our Attorney General and our partners in Springfield. Laterally, in our county of Cook County, they're the health care for where we live. And to get really loud and say how unacceptable, just how unacceptable it is for any hospital, any healthcare provider to discriminate against children. So I think leveraging power, leveraging our voices as elected officials, as citizens, as community members, as parents, we can't underscore, I'm a little bit emotional. We can't, we have to use all leverages of power, including our voices. The other thing I'm thinking about for specifically village government is the partnership with the schools. And they're on the front lines, right? And so to provide the kinds of support and the kind of collaboration that can most strongly support the most vulnerable in our community, which right now, one of which are trans children. And then I think within Village Hall, it's the Department of Public Health has a really excellent team, and they are
Okay, we're going to get started. If everyone can have a seat and get ready. All right, is everybody ready? We're going to get started. We're going to get started with introductions, very, very brief introductions. Everybody ready? All right, we're going to get started with our candidates for village president, and I'm going to allow them a very brief introduction, and then we're going to get going.
So I'm Vicki Scaman. I'm the current village president. At my core, I'm a teacher and very strategic in my approach to solving problems. I graduated from our high school and raised my family here. I started volunteering in our community about 20 years ago to advocate for social and emotional learning in our schools. Later, after running a 200-seat restaurant, I was appointed chair of the Liquor Control Review Board, where I expanded our code to better support restaurants and recruit new businesses while also reducing barriers to licensing and permitting for events. Well, with a talent for identifying grants, I aided the township in securing a grant to reduce underage drinking and ran a coalition with representation from all of our governmental bodies to support that goal. I co-chaired a law review committee that designed our youth adjudication, utilizing diversion strategies, now growing in its participation to include BUILD, to benefit more youth and families. I ran for village clerk in 2017 to help connect residents with resources and increase transparency in government. I ran for village president in 2021 at a time when the village board was divided, to aid in bringing our community together to embrace a shared vision for sustainability, community safety, housing affordability, and DEI goals so that more people in Oak Park feel a sense of belonging in our village. I am running for re-election as your village president to put into motion the strategic plans I led on. With continued community engagement, the benefit of strong neighboring community partnerships for increased impact, and solid relationships at the county and state level for access to resources. I am uniquely positioned to serve most effectively for the next 4 years and will be asking for your vote on April 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Good evening, everyone. Oak Park, it's got immense potential, and I believe that leadership, the local leadership, can actually unlock that potential. Now, I've lived in this community for 19 years almost, and I live with my wife and 2 daughters. I've served as an energy and environment commissioner and as a village trustee the last 4 years. I've championed public safety, racial equity, small businesses, sustainability, arts, and more. These are efforts that make life better for all Oak Parkers. I founded Takeout 25 during the pandemic to help local restaurants survive the pandemic. I brought the community together to make this effort viable. Takeout 25 continues to deliver local economic impact and address sustainability and food security. Yet, Oak Park is falling behind. There have been no major investments in the past 4 years. We've had reckless spending, high taxes, an understaffed police department, and delayed key initiatives. As village president, I will prioritize safety, attract $500 million in private investments to reduce our reliance on property taxes, ensure responsible governance. With 20+ years of leadership experience in complex corporate and community efforts, I know how to build consensus, attract investments, pursue shared visions, and deliver results for Oak Park. I ask for your vote on April 1st to build a stronger, safer, and inclusive Oak Park. Thank you.
Thank you both. All right. What specific changes would you make regarding public engagements in the decision-making process for proposed buildings and developments? In particular, what would you change, if elected, so that Oak Park citizens will have an upfront, meaningful public engagement in a transparent development decision process? Please be specific.
Okay, actually,
It takes a second.
thank you very much for this question. So you just heard that I was the village clerk from 2017 to 2021. I had a big role in helping people who came to the village when they learned that development was going to be around the corner to understand when they would best be able to advocate for their rights and have any influence over the process whatsoever. I created a document that outlined the planned development process. The day that there was going to be a vote at 801 South Oak Park Avenue, I was at a conference in Springfield. I drove back from Springfield for the board meeting to take the public comment because I knew that my presence was going to mean something to everybody who was there for their public comment. And then at the end of the evening, I drove back to Springfield to finish the conference. I've put a great deal of thought into this, and I've already started to make some changes. So I've recently appointed somebody to the Plan Commission that shares my vision in this. I believe that the challenge is very early in the architectural review between when a developer comes to village staff and says, this is what I want to do, can I do it, and how do I do it? We hire an architect firm that works with that developer, and they go back and forth to try to tweak that process, or to tweak the building so that it hopefully best fits within our zoning and plan development. But much of that is not known, and so that we need a lot more transparency around that. And so that any changes to that early review is far more transparent, and that residents are notified earlier and have an opportunity to share their concerns. That can be done one of two ways. It could be that we are instituting a subcommittee to the Plan Commission that is on that early development review, similar to what we see currently in the Historic Preservation Commission. Or we could see something with a new rendition of the Oak Park Economic Development Corporation. So I did lead on shutting down the Oak Park Development Corporation. I had a fantastic relationship with the executive director, John Lynch, but it was a model that worked for my predecessor. It was not a model that was able to respond to the challenges coming out of COVID of responding to recruitment and retention of our small businesses. We wrote it, it was in their contract, and we were working to hold them accountable to that, but the skill set wasn't there, the structure wasn't there. What we need something that is able to change with the times, that isn't based on the skill set of whatever village president is in office, and has an opportunity for everyone sitting at the board table to help guide. We want to have policies of what our incentive programs are, ones that we discuss before a development comes, so there's an understanding of what kind of rate on return it is that we're looking for as a community before we have engaged developers, but also something that's transparent to the developers themselves so they know what what our interest is in advance. So, because some of what we've heard from developers is that to not know what we're going to be okay with is some of their concern as to whether they should even come here and develop or not. It is true that for the foreseeable future, I do see missing middle. To say that we've missed out on opportunity, though, is false. We have seen 2 affordable housing developments that are coming forward right now, one on Madison, one on Roosevelt Road. We have also invested in a strategic plan to identify where our opportunities are, and we're going through a community engagement process to expand that right now. We're lifting up also a neighborhood services division that's going to resemble, for those of you who've lived here for a long time, our early community relations programs with Sherlyn Reed, where we have kind of a grassroots relationship with each neighborhood in our community, and that opportunity to seek their advisory role whenever there's something new coming forward.
Just to reiterate, we want to focus on the public engagement part of the development as it comes.
It's included.
Yeah. So I think very often what I've seen in my 18 years here is developments come in and it always catches a segment of the population by surprise. And then it becomes a point of resistance and we end up fighting as a community and the development drags on, or the decision-making process drags on. It doesn't help the residents who are resisting it, nor does it help the developer, and it doesn't help the community at large. So engagement has to happen to bring down that resistance. So it is an exercise in change management. So making sure that our engagement process starts with the residents who are most impacted, and how do you assess who are impacted by a potential development, getting their feedback early, so that you can then clear the path for a quick and efficient process for a developer is in the best interest of this community. So the engagement process where I would change is identifying the impacted party, clearing and making sure that they're bought in, and that specific development or the stage is set, regardless of whether the architecture is done or what have you, making sure that the development is primed and people are brought along. And there are several tools that you can use. It's not just technology or face-to-face discussions, but it's a whole host of tool sets that we can use. And I've used that in my business consulting experience where we've had large change management engagements. So that is how I would approach that.
Your role as president and your interaction with the village manager is a critical piece of your role. Can you talk a bit about your relationship with the village manager and your vision for that relationship?
So the village manager, under the village manager form of government, is the only employee that we hire and ultimately fire. And if we don't like how our goals are being potentially implemented, then it is that person that we hold accountable. And so I meet every Monday with the village manager to review the agenda for the next day and to plan for the agenda for the coming month, for the coming weeks. And what he expects from his relationship with me, and we do have an amazing synergy in that I was in a lucky position with the members of the village board that we currently have that are seated with me from 2021 to hire our village manager. So then, understanding already the goals that we were looking to accomplish, we were able to recruit and make sure that we had somebody with that skill set, somebody who shared that vision and that passion. And so he and I do have a great synergy that I truly enjoy working with. That doesn't mean that we always agree. I think that the healthy tension of pushing back and forth a little bit helps continue making sure that we move forward. And that the concerns that I'm hearing as an elected official are being communicated as something that we need to address. Community engagement being a big one. Whenever somebody comes to Oak Park, it's like whatever you think community engagement looks like, just expand that, just bend that, because here in Oak Park, that's not enough, all right? And so, but we say, we actually embrace that. I embrace community engagement so that we are making informed, culturally relevant decisions for our residents. I guess that's fine.
We just want to talk about basically the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to understand the village board's vision and policy setting role as distinct from the village manager's operational responsibilities, right? So the village manager is the one who is responsible for executing the will of the board through the capabilities of the staff that the village has. So understanding that distinction and making sure that you're not overstepping or micromanaging the village manager or village staff is going to be extremely critical. And ensuring that there's a healthy respect for those two roles and clear boundaries on where one starts and the other ends is going to be a key aspect of understanding or an effective relationship that is in the best interest of the community. So, was there another aspect of that question, Laura, or was that it? Yeah, so, so in terms of relationship, so I was part of the board that actually hired Kevin, and I do believe that his service has been valuable for the community, and I completely support his efforts, and we've had a great working relationship as well. So it is something that I can easily take into the village president role as well, and I believe he's got the strategic bent required to execute on the vision that I have.
All right. We live in a town with 6 different taxing bodies. These agencies are responsible for how our property tax dollars are spent. Efficiency means strong collaborations at all levels of government. What role does the village board or village president role play in supporting strong collaborations with its partners? Who is responsible for fostering these collaborations, the board or the staff? What specifically will you do as a trustee or president to support a culture of collaboration in village government?
I think collaboration is incredibly important because a lot of our inefficiencies, which translates to financial inefficiencies as well, which lands as a burden on the community, is because we are a little siloed, right? So we have six taxing bodies, and all for legitimate reasons. But when you have that kind of siloed structure, it's important that you have to necessarily coordinate and collaborate, right? And that is the only way you can drive increased efficiencies. And that has to happen at a board-to-board level and a staff-to-staff level as well, right? So across all these different taxing bodies. So the board-to-board collaboration is effectively done by the village president and trustees, as the case may be. We have the IGov, an intergovernmental agency which does a little bit of that. So there is a specific trustee who sits on that. So there are several mechanisms available for that collaboration. Similarly, there are structures available for the village manager to collaborate with with their counterparts in other taxing bodies, and both are equally important, and both needs to be fostered for us to have an effective governance.
So our village managers, administrators, executive directors, such meet monthly in a manager's meeting. And the village president leads something called COG, Council of Governments, that I lead on a quarterly level. And that includes the managers, so that those priorities that we set as the head elected, so it's the head elected official from each governmental body, COG, Council of Governments, and the head administrator. So we still can bring that cultural relevance of the concerns in our community to major topics that overlap us all, whether it be traffic safety, community safety, sustainability, or the such. And so having been somebody who's worked at or worked with each of our governmental partners in our community, I came into the office in 2021 and remain still somebody who knows more deeply what each of our partners does. Not just what they do and at like a high level, but like the names of their programs and the names of the people who lead their programs. So when you're watching the village board meetings, you'll often hear me say, well, this is already being done here, or we need to make sure that we're connecting with this group over here. And that is a big strength to my leadership to identify those redundancies. Working through our ECHO development is our alternative response. Trustee Enya, as he mentioned in the trustee debate, and I will work to bring a lot of those community partners to the table with the expertise that we're going to help inform the board for the greatest decision. But then I've also kind of pushed back on that tension with, but we don't need to recreate everything because it already, so much of it already exists elsewhere. Where what we can do with our ECHO program is the connector. So the alternative response with the ECHO is not just a mental health response, but it's that response to anything that doesn't really necessarily require calling a police officer that's holding a gun. The best example was that I've been using is when I was driving to dinner with my daughter and my fiance, and there was an older woman who was crossing the street with a walker and some bags, Madison Street, and she was struggling at crossing the street. And so I pulled over and I had John get out of the car to help her cross the street and ask her if she needed anything else. She said no, and so the deep knowledge that I have has me very uniquely positioned to make sure that in this area in particular, we're not only connecting with our governmental partners, and I'm the one who started using governmental partners instead of governmental bodies initially, but also is that we're working together for our shared goals.
Okay, let's get your thoughts on Village Hall and police station renovations. And I'm really looking for some, what are you, I mean, outside of the box, partnering with other taxing bodies, what are we gonna do to get this done? Because it needs to be done. And how are we gonna not have to pay a lot of taxes to do it?
Yes. So first of all, the $150 million, did you want to go first? Yeah, go for it. That's fine. You looked at me, so I just.
Okay, I'll go. So it's important to just paint the picture from on how this decision has evolved, right? As somebody mentioned, this has been in consideration since 2017. We hired an architect to come in, FGM, to do a schematic. Then 2019, I think, is when the architect was hired and moved on. We had the pandemic in the middle of that, but once we got seated as a board, the first time it actually came in front of the board was in 2023. Right? We had some prep sessions around that, but 2023 is the first time it came to the board, in 2023 June. And what was an established necessary need of a police facility for this community was then in that board meeting linked to the Village Hall, and the board direction at that point was, let's demolish and rebuild this Village Hall at about $140 million, right? So that is the first time this whole Village Hall conversation got linked to the much needed police facility. Here we are 2 years later. We don't have a police facility. We are still back on the drawing board. We've spent $2.5 million on multiple architects. We've changed the name of what we are trying to accomplish from a police facility to Village Hall demolition rebuild to a civic center to now a municipal campus. All for a facility, especially the Village Hall. I'm not talking about the police facility. That is absolutely required. And I've consistently said that. I've written about it. It's not something that I'm waking up to at this point and saying. The Village Hall is a facility where an average Oak Parker spends less than 5 minutes a year. To spend $150 million on that, and $150 million is just a conservative estimate. By the time you look at financing costs, interests, the location or the logistical shifts required to move people to a new location and bring them back, it is going to push, close to 200 million potentially, and we don't have a good handle on that. And to sit here in 2025, not having a handle on that and not knowing how it's actually going to impact our residents, that's poor governance. So, I will pause there at this point, but I'd like to continue this discussion, but in the interest of time, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so what you're hearing from my opponent is sensationalism. So first of all, it has been even less than 2 years. We're the first village board to get over the finish line is a full board approval of a new police station. And he went from $150 million, so I just heard him finally say, because I called it out in a recent forum, $140 million. The board has been pushing back on all of those numbers from the very beginning. FGM, he mentioned FGM. We fired FGM because we didn't trust the numbers that they were bringing back. We hired an architect that we truly believe is sincerely working with us and listening to the fact that we need a lower number. And the majority of the number will be a new police station. So the FGM numbers for the police station were between $76 and $86 million. So that's the major chunk of whatever it is that we're going to spend. But all that you've been hearing at the board table is, but we're still looking for a lower number. They've been trying to get from us, okay, if we're going to go with a lower number, give us your priorities so that we bring back to you still matches what you're visioning, what your needs are. And so that's what we've been responding to. I do think it would have been helpful to have had like a finite number of this is the maximum that we can afford. However, never was it to be 100% tax funded. Another false statement from my opponent. Nothing that we do infrastructure-wise has ever been 100% tax funded. We have the luxury of being a home rule community, which means we can seek out additional revenue sources in taxes, but also with grants and with our partner state and county elected officials who share what we're looking for serving our community. So that also is when he has pushed back on what would the levy implications be. However, I do support Trustee Robinson in saying we absolutely have to have that information before we can make this vote. But there has not been one discussion on this. It hasn't said that we are not very concerned about the cost to our community. Also, when you're going for an expenditure of this size, you're never going to put that burden on the people who live here just right now. You're looking for a solution that's going to serve our community for the next 50 years. So you're looking for those, those ways that you're spreading out the payments over the next 30 to 50 years. And with the idea being that it's that constituency that is getting the benefit of the product of the building. Yes, it is me who brought forward, I told you when I introduced myself that I'm a very strategic thinker, and we decided to go with the police station on our own property because it was the most expedient and the most financially feasible to just get going on that right away. But the minute you take a police station out of the basement of Village Hall, I don't know how you don't address at least the maintenance and the renovation needs for the people who work there now. We have OSHA violations. We do have asbestos down there. It is not a good situation. As Trustee Enya said, if you'd like to tour it, I do think that that's something that we're going to need to do is open up the building and have consistent tours. So then if we're being good fiscal stewards of the building, then we are going to need to address that. So some level of maintenance will be required. But as far as renovations for our accessibility, disability access, that I also just see as an absolute priority. We recently held something in our community and realized that not everybody could be there. That's not acceptable. We have an aging constituency. We know that our residents are getting older and that group of our residents is our largest group right now. So if we want the community engagement that we say we're about, then we need to have the building that we're serving our community in to be accessible. But we can phase that work in. So I am extremely confident that when this decision comes back to the village board, as former trustee Taglia stated, we will make a sound decision based on as much information as possible that will reflect the fact that we want to be fiscally responsible, but we also want a building that serves us for the next 50 years, so that means we're also going to want to take into consideration how does government serve its residents and make sure that that's built for the future, as you also heard from some of our trustee candidates. So putting out this false information, it's truly not how you want your village president to operate.
So can I just respond to that? July 2023, did you vote yes or no for that demolition rebuild project at $40 million?
When I said that, I said that I was.
It's a yes or no question?
Yes, I did.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, but I do need to. You asked me the question.
No,
So what I said in the same sentence, not even in a separate sentence, was that I was very aware that our community, this was going to be the first time that our community was going to hear the potential need to demolish the building if that was going to be the most cost effective. Truth is, demolishing the building is still the most cost effective. But the process, and that I was going to want a process, and the proof that I wanted that process to evaluate keeping the building and valuing the building, is that I asked the first person to put me on the facilities task force the day before the actual vote. Because I knew that I was going to want an evidence-based process for evaluating how we could potentially rehab the building to meet our purposes.
That was a yes. And the next part of the point I want to make is tax funding versus grant funding, right? The grant funding, the extent of grant funding that is available to us for something like this is very specific, and it won't even cover the architectural costs of this endeavor, right? So saying that we have grant funding as an option, it won't offset anything. For the residents, it's going to still be a huge financial burden that'll push several people out, right? So that is the reality of the finances in this. And I'm also not willing to hope for the best in the future, knowing that this decision is going to land heavily on community members and price many people out, that we may have other sources of funding, right? So that is not a hope that I'm willing to bank on for making this decision. The other aspect of this which often does not get mentioned, is because of this delay, right, by linking these two things together, where a necessary police facility was delayed by 2 years, this is the same time we have a 30% shortfall in our police department. And we heard all the trustees talk about how that's impacting our ability to attract police officers to fill in that gap. So here we are in a situation where we've taken on a poor decision, defined a poor governance process, and willing to put a huge burden on this community, and we're back to square one, having spent $2.5 million on that decision. Or you be the judge.
So I am so glad you brought that back up, Trustee Parakkat, because thinking that it was a short-sighted decision for any amount of time, because I also said this at the board table the night of this vote. We want to talk about transparency. I'm the one who's watched our village board in the past, before I was serving in this role, make decisions and spend money that then got re-spent, or that got taken apart and never actually worked for the purpose that they were set forward. I don't want to see that happen. And so we had a village manager at the time, not the current one, who I guarantee you that she was quite aware that the minute you take the police department out of the basement and move them, that you're going to have surprise costs. I was thinking forward and being very strategic and analyzing, understanding that to have a master plan allows us to budget and plan for this more responsibly.
I'll allow one final follow-up before we move on.
I just want to, and we probably will cover this, in a different question as well. But I think transparency is important. But saying that we are transparent again and again does not constitute transparency, right? It has to reflect in our governance. It is a core governance principle. And one example I will take is the recent set aside of $1 million for the Percy Julian home project without a plan. First of all, our role as a village is unclarified. We don't know what that fund is going to be used for. And the day that decision, it was brought to the board after the public hearing of the budget and pushed into the budget on the final day of approval. And that day I called the current resident. This is a private residence, mind you. The current resident, Faith Julian, who is Dr. Percy Julian's daughter, she was just as surprised as me about that agenda being there, right? That is not transparency. That is, we have to do better in terms of transparency. So we can say all we want about it has been a transparent governance and government and all of that, but it is not reflected in our actions.
On to that?
No. We're moving on.
Really good one.
Moving on. All right, over the past 2 years, the adjudication director, health director, village attorney, finance director, and development services director have left. Since the current village manager started in 2022, are you at all concerned about what these resignations say about the work culture at Village Hall? What actions can you take as a village president to improve the work culture and stop the brain drain at Village Hall?
So I always have concern for that the people that were working for the Village of Oak Park feel properly appreciated and have the resources that they need to do their job. It is, again, one of the reasons that I think investing in Village Hall is ultimately going to save us money long term. And we have, not only do we know this from the materials that we read, but we're literally feeling it. The market that is out there for municipal employees is very challenging and competitive. Our CFO was poached by our previous village manager to go to the community for the job that she took. And then we have other staff who were able to get up to $80,000 more in their new jobs, living closer to home, to their new workplace. So no, I don't put that on our village manager and his skill set. I think that he's a transformational leader that believes in the values of this community. I do want to hear from the directors, heads, and the employees at Village Hall. We do have a personnel committee of the village board that will consider those 360 reviews and other types of reviews so that we can hear that straight from them as well, but also hope that when they are responding that way, they're also sharing what else it is that can help them feel more gratified in their position. And I don't think that municipal government is the only field that has felt some of these significant challenges since COVID.
So I think staffing, obviously the village board has just one employee, which is the village manager, right? And the accountability for the rest of the staff rests with the village manager. But what the board does have control is about the scope of village operations, right? So making that really focused. So, from our goal setting to, aligning our vision to our goals to the vision that we have, And deciding the scope of village operations is absolutely critical, because if we set, say, 50 goals and then go out and start pursuing goals 51, 52, 53 right after that, what happens practically as somebody who's run an organization is that the village manager or the CEO has to, work within the bounds of the capability that he has in the organization. If that is overloaded, then you start seeing these kind of issues, right? So where the board can give a directive, but the staff and the capability set of the staff, it bounces out. So that creates a very stressful work environment. And that sometimes can lead to the outcomes that you're referring to, like lots of talent drain, people going to other communities where it is not quite as stressful. So there is a role that the village board can play in terms of understanding the capacity and capability of the organization, defining the scope, and being able to create work and policy or directives that are within those bounds in consultation with the village manager. I think that's going to be absolutely critical to solve this problem.
I'm sorry. The local newspaper, the Wednesday Journal, described the 2025 Oak Park Economic Vitality Plan as laughably lame. There appeared to be very little real effort put into the public engagement regarding this very expensive plan. Can you name one tangible thing that you would expect to see come out of this economic vitality plan that would help expand a small or medium-sized business in Oak Park? Can you name one tangible thing that you would expect to see come out of the study that will help expand small and medium-sized businesses in Oak Park?
Okay, so gratefully, we have a board that holds accountable our staff, and until we're satisfied, we're going to keep pushing back on the economic vitality plan to meet our expectations. What we're looking for is we're looking to identify what opportunity there is for recruitment of new small businesses that was not under the purview of the previous model. We're looking for what type of infrastructure and support, like this Oak Park Avenue streetscape or a Chicago Avenue streetscape, that would bring new business, expand our tourism opportunity. Oh, so this is where I get to talk about Percy Julian. So Chicago Avenue is, I think, an opportunity for growth for our community, but from Harlem Avenue to Austin. We've got some really amazing new businesses with broken tart that are creating a great walkable feel that we can totally appreciate. It's also unique that to other areas in our community. What's really great about Oak Park is 12 business districts that all have kind of an individual character that makes Oak Park beautiful. But we do not, as a community, really publicize how the public art that we have in our community and our investment with the Oak Park Area Arts Council and the Oak Park Art League. So then you travel just a little bit east and boom, you're at the Frank Lloyd Wright Home and Studio that is expanding right now to include like architectural classes and opportunity for scholarships. You go a little bit further, you're at the Oak Park Art League. And to really just support them for what they provide for our village. You go a little bit further, and you've got the Percy Julian Home. I do believe that our community values truth. We value, sharing a story about our history and basing that in truth. And so to ever see the Percy Julian Home be a learning center, which is Faith Julian's goal, and I have spoken to Faith Julian at length on that, as have past trustees, Trustee Taglia and Trustee Enya sitting at the board table with me right now. We do know that that can be a public-private partnership. The village board cannot pay anyone's taxes for them, okay? And so the investment in the Percy Julian home would be for that economic vitality and increased tourism for our community. And with the vote to put it in savings was that it was going to be the board that would collectively create boundaries or guidelines and what we would do with the dollars. But to talk about transparency, again, our current board knows exactly what it would have costed for if we would purchase the corner lot where Percy Julian used to have a tulip garden and sorry, anyway, so we know what that cost would be, they know what that cost would be, and we were unanimous on supporting that. So then to go further to the east to support to Austin, thank you.
Trying to get at what would come out of the plan, that we've paid.
Opportunity.
Yeah, opportunity is your answer.
That all of this is part of the economic vitality plan. So connecting all the dots of what I've talked about as opportunity on Chicago Avenue is an example of what we would expect to come out. I can do the same thing with other areas of our community that have extensive opportunity as well.
These are ideas that you just came up with. Is this an idea that they are?
Right, but the economic vitality, what they do is they interview each elected official and stakeholders. And they want to make, so that, so they'll also bring back certain policies that we would have for those incentive programs that I was talking about earlier. They, for development, and they would bring back, recruitment ideas that make the vision that I have as village president, how we could actually get there and attain that, and what kind of economical partners we could have to help pay for it.
So I'm not happy with where our current economic vitality planning process is. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of the key initiatives that was delayed. So 2 years after disbanding OPEDC, we still don't have an economic vitality plan, which is kind of unacceptable because we're falling behind. Now, what I would like to see from the plan, is how it creates a diversified future. So ultimately, when I'm looking at the future vision of Oak Park, the two aspects that are really important is taking all our assets in this community, economic assets, whether it is our historical architecture or the tourism that we have, entertainment, all those assets, and all the entities that are responsible for that, the Chamber and Visit Oak Park, and kind of directing them in that vision, right? So making sure that they're all pulling in the same direction towards executing that vision. So I would like this economic vitality plan to create a roadmap for that. The second aspect of it is how we attract investments. So making sure that it gives us a roadmap for how we can bring in investments to diversify our tax base. Because one of the key metrics that I will use would be the tax burden. How do we diversify the tax base so that our over-reliance on property taxes is shifted even by a little bit. So what does this economic vitality plan do to create the roadmap for that? So those two elements are what I'm looking for, and unfortunately I've not seen that reflected in what's come back to the board so far.
All right, I do have a question that's directed for Ravi directly. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned a private investment of $500 million. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So what I'm referring to there is, we often hide behind the notion that Oak Park is a landlocked community and our ability to develop this community is limited. But I want us to challenge ourselves, especially when we are looking at, say, the Moore's property, or there are certain parcels along Roosevelt or North Avenue, which are ripe for development, right? So even if you take the simple example, just for illustration, the Moore's property, and really focus on that and attract investments, that has the potential to attract about $250 million, right, if done right. And that can be done in a way that does not create resistance within this community. A lot of times when we attract investments and plonk that, right next to a residential area, that is when the community, there's tension in the community and we have to deal with that. I believe that, even if we identify 10 parcels where we can, clearly, clearly look at developing those or attracting investments for those specific properties, even if three or four of them pan out, I think we'll have the $500 million in investments coming into this community without any resistance from the community. So all our different goals, whether it is historic preservation or new development, diversification of tax base, all of them can be balanced, because at the moment what we are doing is we are taking tax dollars and applying that to develop the community, and that is extremely ineffective from a cost perspective and how you leverage your financial resources. What I'm proposing is using that as leverage to attract targeted investments from outside to develop specific parts of our community that is predefined and set aside without, with the help of the community, without community resistance.
Can you be more specific on that? Because I know what would work there, and it's not currently owned by the village.
What would you like me to be more specific on?
So you said that there's investments of 200, that the Moore property has a potential of bringing in private investment of $250 million. It's currently privately owned. It is in foreclosure because the developer overpaid for the land, and the developer was not able to actually come up with a plan that we as a village board would approve for development there that would not be infringing too much on the neighborhood, that then met the bottom line was something that would be profitable for them. So while it's owned by somebody else, we can't actually do anything to develop it. We do certainly, I believe I have understanding of what would work there. What would, with $250 million, what exactly does that look like?
So it could look like many things, right? So I'm giving an approach as opposed to what specifically the $250 million would look like, right? So, the immediate need is to focus on those kind of, identifying and focusing on those aspects, as opposed to creating a plan for this one aspect, right? So what we have to direct the village manager and our economic vitality team to do is redouble and focus on the things that we prioritize, as opposed to going broad. We don't have the focus and we are not effective. That is the problem that I'm trying to identify. If we are focused, we can attract the right investments and develop the community differently. And we've related.
That wasn't an answer.
That is the answer I have.
It wasn't and you're currently a sitting board member, and you haven't brought forward any of these ideas.
I have. But you set the agenda, as you mentioned earlier.
Okay, you guys, it's time. It's 8:30, believe it or not. I got one final question. They're gonna answer it. They're definitely gonna answer it. Who are you supporting for president?